should I stand behind the lectern and use the microphone there? I was kidding. Brenda mentioned a little bit a few moments ago that we're running just a little bit behind, and things like that concern her, so she wired me up so that if I run over my time, she can administer an electric shock remotely from over there where she is. The overall title of tonight's presentation is Gentle Teaching, and that may be a new expression to a lot of you. So Brenda asked me to give kind of not only a historical perspective of gentle teaching, but also kind of an overview of what gentle teaching is. And in order to do that, well, she has to go way back in history to find somebody who was around gentle teaching for several years, many years. So I told her that I would do this. But I have to tell you a little bit about my own experience with gentle teaching in order to get into the history of gentle teaching and also what it means, just the fundamentals of it. In 1987, I came to work just outside of Detroit, Michigan, for a very large human services organization. This organization, MORC, serves about 4,500 people with intellectual disabilities over 2 counties in Michigan. And I happened to arrive at MORC at just exactly the right time, because as I was arriving and taking a job with MORC, my supervisor was just returning from Omaha, Nebraska, where she had gone through a workshop with a man by the name of John McGee, Dr. John McGee, on gentle teaching. And my boss, Jan, came back absolutely enthusiastic, fired up about this gentle teaching stuff. And she gave me a little green book about this big. And the name of the book was Gentle Teaching, a Non-Aversive Approach to Helping Persons with Mental Retardation. Gentle Teaching, a Non-Aversive Approach to Helping Persons with Mental Retardation. A very tough read. But you don't have to worry about getting it or buying it or reading it or studying it, because it's out of print and it's not available almost any place, although I have a copy. But she told me, Mike, read this book and get very familiar with the content, because this is the approach we're going to use here at Macomb Regional Center. And we're going to train all of our caregivers in gentle teaching. Now, I had just started with MORC, and I came to MORC from the most gentle of environments, the United States Army. And in the Army, I had, of course, the most gentle of occupations. I was a prisoner of war interrogator. So if any of you want your nails done a little bit later, I'll be happy to help you out. So we went through the process of developing a curriculum about gentle teaching, which is a lengthy process. It took us about 2 years to develop this curriculum for caregivers. And in 1990, we started training all of our caregivers in gentle teaching. That's a lot of caregivers. Over the course of 25 years at MORC, I trained somewhere in the vicinity of 40,000 caregivers through MORC. Lots and lots of people. Gentle teaching was entirely different from what the rest of the state of Michigan was doing at the time. The state of Michigan was absolutely dedicated to physical management, physical control, contingencies, restraints, timeout rooms. And MORC on its own went in a different direction. So back to this book that John gave us about gentle teaching, and he's written some other books more recently that are much more up to date. The basic premise of gentle teaching was that all persons hunger for connectedness and human companionship. All persons. His book was specifically addressed about people with mental retardation. But he phrased our central purpose at that time as caregivers is the central purpose of caregiving is to teach the experience of companionship. The central purpose of caregiving is to teach the experience of companionship. That narrow focus has changed an awful lot over the years. And one of the reasons it has was because general teaching got a reputation as being a caregiving competency, a staff competency, as opposed to an organizational culture. So over the years, general teaching developed into a much broader central purpose. And the rephrased central purpose is the central purpose of our presence in the lives of others is to teach, nurture, and sustain the experience of connectedness, companionship, and community. There's an awful lot in that central purpose. First of all, it does not focus specifically on people with disabilities or mental disabilities or disenfranchised. General teaching is talking about normal human relationships, right? Your relationship with your family, with your friends, with your coworkers is exactly that, the experience of connectedness, companionship, and community. Secondly, it had to be a very concrete message, not the theory of connectedness, not the idea, not I'm going to tell you everything there is to know about companionship, and then I'm going to give you a test, 250 questions, and you have to get 80%. But that experience, what it's like to be a friend, what it's like to have a friend. Pretty fluffy stuff, really abstract, way up in the clouds stuff, right? Excuse me. How do we teach connectedness, companionship, and community? The way that John described this and the way that we've developed this over the years is by 4 principles that we call the 4 pillars. And I'll tell you right now, for the foundation of general teaching, there's only 9 things to remember. And I've already told you one of them, that's the central purpose, right? Everything else as a starting point for general teaching is contained in these 9 fundamental things. So these 4 pillars, if I go to an organization and I ask somebody who's some experience in general teaching what the 4 pillars are, I can almost guarantee they're going to recite. Safe, loved, loving, and engaged. Safe, loved, loving, and engaged. These 4 pillars, however, are a lot more than that. These are emphatic communications to the people that we serve. Statements with a lot of exclamation points behind them. So the first one is, we communicate to the person, you are safe with me. Always, and in every fashion, right? Always safe with me. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to humiliate you. I'm not going to make things difficult for you. I'm not going to wrap your arms around you and drop you on the carpet and mash your nose into the carpet, right? You're always safe with me. Second pillar is, you are loved unconditionally. Absolutely. Regardless of how you're behaving, how you're acting, what you're doing, you are loved unconditionally. Over the years, I have learned that a lot of organizations are really uncomfortable with that word loved. They can't say it. They cannot pronounce that word loved. They can use it at home. They can use it in television commercials. But on their job, they cannot. Their vocabulary collapses. Some years ago, at Super Bowl time, there was a commercial for beer, when all the new commercials come out. And there was a young man and a young woman sitting at a bar table. And they were having a chat, and the girl turns to the guy, and with the very softest expression on her face, she says, I've been wanting to tell you for a long time, I love you. This is not good for the guy. He has to do something. He has to respond to this. All right? If he ignores this or if he messes it up, this relationship is over. So he tries to say that, and he chokes on the word, and he can't get it out of his throat. Oh. And the waitress walks past. And she says, would you like another Miller Lite? And he turns to the waitress and he says, I would love one. He could say it to the beer, but not to the young lady. A lot of times people initially have a lot of difficulty with that concept of lovingness and what it means. No matter what term a person uses, they have an expression for absolute unconditional acceptance, absolute unconditional valuing. For many of us in gentle teaching community, we had to grow into comfort using that word, love. So then we come to the third principle, and the third pillar, and that is you can learn to become loving. You can learn to become loving to me, to yourself, and to others. Right? We can teach that. Right? So many of the people that we work with, the homeless people, the elderly, people with Alzheimer's, people with intellectual disabilities, people who have mental illness, live their lives in fear. They don't feel safe at all. They very often feel unloved. Worse than that, very often feel unlovable, not capable of being loved. And you cannot give what you don't get, right? You can't express lovingness without having experienced it yourself. We can teach people that. The fourth pillar is it is good to be engaged. It is good to be engaged. This pillar of engagement, it talks about what moms and dads want for their children: obedience, compliance, doing the right thing, being a good boy or being a good girl, helping people out, being polite, being courteous. It is good to be with me. You don't have to do anything. I will carry the load. Just be with me. You are safe with me. If a person learns just to be with us, then they can learn it is good to do things with me. And that last level of engagement is it is good to do things for yourself, for me, and for others. And that is a kind of definition of connectedness with others. So that's the 4 pillars. We've got the central purpose. We have 4 pillars. That's 5 out of the 9 fundamental things you need to know about gentle teaching. But it's still really awful pie in the sky stuff. Real good philosophy, but nothing to grab onto, right? We need something more. Most of us, excepting perhaps Mandy and Dave and Brenda, most of us are not yet angelic beings. Your halo is drooping a little bit, Dave. We're concrete, physical beings, right? And so we need concrete, sensory ways to communicate what's going on in our heart and in our mind, right? I cannot telepathize across the room to say you are safe with me by my thought transference. I used to be able to do that. I cannot anymore. So the way that we have those sensory ways of communicating safe and loved are the same ways we do it with our family, with our friends, with our coworkers, with the police officer that stops you on the side of the road, right? We use our words. We use our eyes. We use our hands, and we use our presence. But again, this is not a spelling list to recite. Words, eyes, hands, presence. These are emphatic statements, exclamation point statements. So the first one are words. And this is hard to do. Speak only kindly. Speak only kindly. Imagine how difficult that is when you're having the worst day of your career, of your life. Never mind what this person is giving you, all right? Just to speak only kindly. And then the second one, did I get confused? No, I didn't. I said it right. The eyes. Look only warmly. Look only warmly. This tool is the hardest one to manage because this is the one we don't see ourselves. We don't see ourselves. Jim comes into me and he says, Mike, I really need a day off. I've been working really, really hard. Well, just before Jim came in to my office, I'm reading a bill for car repairs, $973.82. Right? I read that bill, and what's my face doing? It's telling Jim something. It's telling Jim, don't even ask. Not only are you not going to get a day off, you're probably not going to get a vacation this year at all either. So it's one that we have to really, really be attentive to. What is my face? What is my expression telling people? Right? Is it telling them safe, loved, loving, engaged? Or is it telling him go away and get out of my face? Right? Leave me alone. It takes practice. It takes attentiveness. The third pillar is your hands. Touch only gently. Touch only respectfully. There's a couple things about this. When in 1987, when I started with MORC, our strategy for behavior management was physical intervention, physical control. What we fondly return to as knockdown drag-alongs, right? And that's the way we treated people. And so we taught people that human touch is not a good thing. It's a harmful thing, a hurtful thing, dangerous thing. We backed away from that beginning in 1990 and completely in 1996. And in 1996, McComb Regional Center was the first large agency in the entire country to drop physical intervention techniques and stop training. And they haven't trained caregivers in physical intervention since then, almost 20 years. But again, touch causes a lot of people difficulty, right? They think this is not a good thing. Touch is not a good thing. We have to keep our physical distance. We cannot invade a person's space. I want people invading my space, right? I want my bride, my Margot Lynn, to come up close to me and touch me and hug me, right? I don't hug and kiss everybody, but I don't want to live my life without it either, right? People have difficulty grasping that concept, which is why we added that expression. We don't want to rule out touch for people, but we do want them to be able to be touched and to learn to touch respectfully, the way that people do. And that can be taught. And then the last pillar is, what is the last pillar? Yes, thank you. Our presence. Our presence. Right? And that means be there with the person and for the person. Be there with the person and for the person. Right? It also means mentally. Be present, right? Be attentive and alert to the person. See what that person is feeling, right? Be a reader of hearts. Not just a reader of minds like an interrogator, but a reader of hearts, right? To recognize when a person feels unsafe, unloved, unloving, angry, hurt, disconnected, disengaged, hopeless. Does that make sense? How am I doing on time?
The budget's going to go off pretty soon.
Pretty soon? Like 10 minutes?
In a couple of minutes.
Anyway, so that's what I've been training people as a classroom trainer, a caregiver trainer, and director of training for 27 years now. Brenda mentioned that I retired from McComb Regional Center 2 years ago. I retired from my job as director of training so that I could escape from things like spreadsheets and staff meetings and committees and work groups and reports and all that kind of stuff. But so that I could keep training people and teaching people about general teaching, right? There's a commercial popular right now that says retirement is when you pay yourself to do what you love to do. So that's what I do.